Hello, everyone. We're so excited today to be joined by a very special guest, Spoon, the Aristocratic Utensil on YouTube, as well as on X, although your handle on X is at Aris.
And what I wanted to talk about today was voting and democracy, and is it relevant anymore, and how could you construct better systems? And I thought that you'd be a great person to have on with this, especially talking with us, because I know that you had like monarchist leanings. People have called our political beliefs plutarchist. I'm interested to hear more from you.
Oh, well, basically, how did I get to my views?
Yeah.
Well,
did you grow up?
Why you think it's better? Why you think it's a good structure? What a perfect country would look like?
Okay, so it's kind of weird how I even got into politics in general, because if I were to look at like my 16-year-old self and my 35-year-old self and go, "You're going to be on YouTube one day talking about politics," I would go, "Okay, what the hell happened in my life that made me take an interest in politics, let alone monarchy? How did I get to that? That's just bizarre. I don't how." And it was basically because a friend of mine several years ago, this was like back in early 2010s, I want to say, before Bernie Sanders really hit the scene, but she was also a Bernie fan. This will show you how long the culture has shifted for in just a very short amount of time, actually, is that she was a Californian girl who was, let's just say she was built in a very feminine way. She's from California, but lefty perspectives, but she can troll like an absolute asshole right-winger, which by today's standards makes no sense. An extremely lefty person, but they spit right-wing insults, yes. Like, she would drop slurs in a way that would get you banned on Twitter within 30 seconds, which is not a human being that exists today's standard. And she got me into Bernie Sanders as a political figure. And then right about the time he said a couple of things that made me as a South African go, that's just factually not true. Like, he said, white people don't know what it's like to be poor. And I went, mathematically, that doesn't even add up. That's just not true. And the way he spoke about certain racial policies made me go, okay.
Were you a like Bernie supporter at this point? Like, you liked him as a political candidate?
Yes, I think. Okay, so I said this in one of my streams, and I think this is what makes you go further left-leaning and what makes you right-wing, is that from the old liberal perspectives, I do think it is based upon a lot of people can look at the system and go, there is a lot of corruption, there is a lot of unnecessary government control in places they shouldn't be, and they sort of just look at the current paradigm and go, this is not a moral system. And the problem is they look at this situation and go, there should be state intervention. What they're really looking for is morality in the state. Whereas if you're a right-winger, you'll recognize this doesn't work.
Right.
And so you'll tend to go for more a libertarian perspective, which is just these institutions are beyond repair because they incentivize a certain behavior that you cannot generate just through powering through the institutions. You have to structure them in a way that actually make the political class want to benefit the citizenry. And the way that they want the system to work just does not gel with human nature. And when you go from that perspective, you can go, okay, now you have to shift libertarian or go completely insane and advocate for monarchy in the 21st century. That's more the route that I took. Whereas the opposite end of leftism, they are just motivated purely by envy. There's just that I cannot compete in this system, and so I must smash it to bits in the hopes that whatever comes next will appeal to me. And I've seen the people who go for that, and I don't want to be disrespectful, but there's not a brain cell in those people. Like, really, they are completely driven by this fantasy idea of an idealized bureaucracy. It's kind of weird. This is the way I describe these people, is whatever I wish to see in a king, they wish to see in an entire bureaucracy that abides by their morality.
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, because what I feel differently about what you were saying is you were saying that like the sort of the leftist leaning is smash what exists and then rebuild it. Whereas I think that was how it was for a while. And then it turned to just have the government fix it. Like, fix the
because they're in power now.
Fix them, fix the market failure. And then this assumption that the entire government can suddenly
do that on a whim. Yes.
I really like a point you made here, and I'd elevate it as I think that this is distinctly part of what makes the new right quite different from the old right, which is the new right isn't particularly sold around one government ideology. It's more just that they actually want to fix things. And they have multiple hypotheses about how that can be done. And there is like active debate and active attempts to implement this. We even see with like Elon and Trump's government right now, or JD Vance, talking about like economic issues that would typically be outside the normal right, whereas the left just wants to not have to worry about money, and that can be achieved through printing money or taking money.
Yeah, they're basically materialists. I would say the biggest problem that the right has, and this is going to sound a bit strange, but there is an aspect that the left, this makes no sense if I say it out loud, so I have to sort of explain this, unpack this a bit, is the left understands humanity and the right does not, which
Okay,
I'm aware
explain what
sounds
you mean by
makes,
that.
yes. Here's what I mean by that. The Harry on the Lotus Eaters pointed this out as well, because him and I were having a conversation about this, is that the way that the left operates is they claim to champion egalitarianism and equality, equal rights, and all this stuff, but the way they behave in power is militantly hierarchical.
Yes.
There's control from the top, and anything down below, there's no dissent. It's one man follow, like a general in an army. It's why they make such powerful roads, because they actually abide by how humans actually function. The problem of it is the ideas they implement don't work because they don't abide by human nature. What the right doesn't recognize is this is how your opposition plays the game, is they will make you abide by their rules, and they just hack the system because they know that as long as you play by those rules, you will lose and they can do whatever the hell they want. That's something that the right needs to learn, is that if you wish to get in power, is that your opposition just gets power and imposes their will. What you have to do is get in power and force your worldview down their throats. This is the same way they do to you. Don't this is an idea of no. Ideas must be challenged and ideas must be debated. And like, yeah, that's a nice ideal if everyone is playing the same game.
Yeah.
However, if you're not playing the same game, then it's I have the biggest stick and I'm going to beat the crap out of you with it. And people think this is oppressive, but this is how the world works.
Structurally, how do you do that? Like if you were giving advice, I mean, I feel like right now, when I look at what the Trump administration is doing this cycle, I'm like, wow, like this is exactly what I've always wanted to see a president do. Like, would you be telling them to do something different, or do you think they finally like figured it out?
I think if you were to just I would think America's biggest problem is separation of church and state. I don't think that is a good idea. I think any sane civilization, the church and state must be wielded if it's going to survive.
Oh,
Because
here's an area where I would disagree really strongly. I think combining the church and the state always ends up watering down the church with more progressive or secular ideals, as we've seen happen to the church in the UK.
Well, but
you also have that
we're
in America.
moving in more Spoon's direction, because the
no,
Domestic Policy
have that in
Council
America.
under Haley is part of broader efforts to reshape domestic policy, including the establishment of the White House Faith Office, which was established via executive order on February 7th. And it aims to integrate faith-based perspectives.
That is pretty badass. Yes. No, but hold on, because I actually believe this very strongly. I think that in the US and in the UK, some churches have liberalized, but within the UK, like the church that always ends up liberalizing one of the most is whenever you have, at least to my knowledge, pretty much in every country where you have a church and state integration, and that church and state integration is a Christian one rather than a Muslim one, the state ends up corrupting the church and making it very progressive. So if we had a state-based version of Christianity in the US, it would be one of the most progressive versions. I was just watching a great video with Dean Zuber.
It would be Unitarian Universalist.
Yeah, and he was pointing out that the oldest churches in the US are always the most progressive, and the newer churches are always the more conservative. What are your thoughts on that?
I wonder if that's more an American phenomenon. Because I think that scales depending on the culture around them. The reason I say this is because I actually think it's about the competing sects of Christianity. Because the reason I say this is because I've had conversations with American Protestants and the Protestants back home. And what I find interesting is that South Africa's Christian sect comes from like the French Huguenots that were trying to escape Catholic persecution in France. And you have Germans and you've got Dutch mix. And there's no other competing sect of Christianity. It's just Protestants. So
Mhm.
there's no like Russian Orthodox, or I mean there is now, I suppose, but there's no like mixture of competing ideologies, and so there's just the one. And I get the feeling that if it's just like this one that everyone relies on, then okay, yeah, it is more. I suppose it is easier to change the culture if you happen to permeate the church and change it from the inside. But it is also more protective because everyone knows that, yeah, this is the only entrance you can go to change is through this one institution. Like there's no other entrances. So I'm wondering if the competition of many also makes it easier to spread the ideology in ways like what you just said is like age is the variation that you just brought up. I'm not saying this is the case. I'm just wondering if that might
we
be.
actually have talked about this a lot on the show because it's something that we study to try to understand how to like keep cultures protected. And a really common phenomenon you see across religions is if a religion is connected to the state, like if or even the majority of the population, like if a Catholic majority population in a country, the Catholics in that country will be very, very loosey-goosey Catholics. But if they are a minority, particularly a oppressed minority, then they will be much more conservative and rigid in following their beliefs. And I can understand why that would be the case.
That's probably why. It's because if they're a minority, they feel threatened. If they feel threatened, they will take whatever is closest as a defensive mechanism and bolster it.
Yeah.
And once something becomes more mainstream, it becomes more watered down.
So a question I had for you based on what you were saying earlier is aligning government worker incentives with sort of like what is good for the people. I've written extensively on this particular subject because I think it's really interesting. The way that like I wrote is probably the best you could do that is to separate the different incentives that you would want for a state and then build voting patterns based on each of those incentives, i.e. like the amount that you're paying in taxes determines your vote within one branch of the government. How many kids you have determines your vote within another branch of the government. I'm wondering how you look to do this within a monarchist system or within any sort of a system that you would think of. Like, how do you align the government bureaucrats' incentive with the people?
I quite like what you just pitched there, like almost like a scoring-based system for your sway and power.
Yeah,
that's kind of cool, actually. But my only
okay,
problem,
I can explain how my government system works.
No. I want to hear his only problem with that comment.
Okay.
My only problem that I have with democracy in general. I was reading a short stint by a book by James, I think it was James Brennan, The Case Against, or like Against Democracy. And one of the early things that he points out with is that there is an idea of democracy in a sort of idealistic way, is that if you give people information, they will vote in a certain direction that is more in line with their interests. That makes sense on paper. The problem is you can have the smartest people in the world, but if everyone you vote for is a corrupt asshole, the geniuses of your population goes nowhere. I actually asked this on Twitter. I said, if you could have a smart population or moral politicians, what would you have? Like 90% said moral politicians. Like the intelligence of the population did not matter because they said those who are in the state are the ones who make the policy and those are the people that matter. The voice of the people in the grand scheme of things does not matter if everyone that you can vote for is a prick. Which is like, oh God, yeah. Like I was listening to some of the people that are like outspoken Democrats today.
Yeah.
And I said to a friend of mine, you realize the most rational Democrat right now is probably John Fetterman.
Honestly,
yeah, I like John Fetterman.
And,
he's local to us, and I'm like, if John Fetterman won and then ran in the next election cycle for president, I think he'd be a really hard person to beat.
Yep.
That's the guy with like a literal brain injury is the most functional one. It's like an SNL skit.
Yeah. Well, no. We've been on SNL skit mode since 2016. This has been great.
Yeah. It also kind of makes me embarrassed when I just look at human civilization. I sort of look at this and go,
well, we're in the interesting timeline. Don't you want to be in the interesting timeline?
I'd rather be in a functional timeline.
Lame.
I disagree.
No, I'm very boring. I'm a guy.
This is where I might disagree the most with you because I love people. I was on, I don't know, some show on I don't know, Fox or something, and they were like, oh, aren't you tired of being the rebellion? And I was like, no. Being the rebellion's the best. This is awesome. I am fighting a big bad evil. I have my collection of Rudy Tooty. Like, in fact, I almost think if we won and we began consolidating power, I may feel an instinct to switch sides because I feel like, am I just like a voice of the state now?
Yeah, that is a way to view it, but I would say there's a certain kind of monotonous thing about it, is that you're just constantly cheering for your side. And I do understand the aspect of it is more fun to be the rebel that punches, whereas there's a certain element of, okay, how can I say this, like aristocratic hoity-toityness of just like, oh, we're in power now and we get to dictate what we want, ha ha ha, and you come across like an evil villain. But then I also look at my opposition and go, when you were in power, this is what you did to me. I'm going to enjoy crushing your soul for the next 4 years.
I mean,
And I will be very villainous about it because I have the accent for it. So, haha.
Yeah.
If you got it, flaunt it.
I worry.
Yeah, you may as well.
I mean, I see this instinct on part of the right? But
Yeah.
they haven't been successful in influencing the at least the Trump administration, the position of power right now. And I think that this is enormously good. If you look at where the Trump administration is actually counting its wins right now, and Trump has even said this in some of his speeches, he focuses only on 90-10 issues. And I think that this is really smart because we don't want to have happened to us what happened to the wokes in the culture war, which is we let our version of like trans activists that are pushing things that like wouldn't even win within our own party as our mainstream message and then get the general public to hate us. And I think Trump has been, while he has been like absolutely brutal on the stuff that every American agrees on, like Doge and USAID and everything like that, and the trans people in sports, he hasn't pushed over the line. And there was actually an issue, Simone, where you wanted him to push over the line. And then you were like, oh, I actually appreciate, what was the issue? I can't remember. You're like, why won't he go over on this?
Oh, no, daylight savings. Yeah.
Daylight savings. Yeah, you wanted him to abolish daylight savings.
Yeah, because most
like, it's
rational
not
people do.
Issue.
Yeah, he points out
that is a surprisingly popular issue to abolish daylight savings, and I don't. Is there a particular reason why? I'm not privy to this. I've just seen a lot of people do it, and I go, "Why is this like an issue?"
Because an hour is stolen from your weekend once every year. It is the worst holiday of the year.
But Simone, you the specific argument you laid out for me is
specifically. So it has been scientifically shown that on daylight savings day, because of the schedule change, because not everyone is on board and that organized, there is a spike in hospitalizations and heart attacks and I think strokes as well because of the stress associated with the time change. Now, I would argue that simplifying the tax code with the IRS would probably save a lot more lives because I think that causes way more stress than like a time change being, oh, I'm late for work. But it's still a fairly lame
I had a horrible dark joke now where that went.
Because like, tell the joke. That's our audience right here.
That's like the difference between the male and female. My immediate reaction was, my God, if daylight savings time causes you heart attacks, maybe you're supposed to die.
I mean, it calls the week. Yes, we can just call it Gentle Purge Day. Happy Gentle Purge Day. Oh God.
But at least you can see your death coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
We talk about this on this channel a lot as like the pronatalist people. People are like, oh, you must want these selfish dink couples having more kids. And I'm like, no, like it is great that they're being removed from the gene pool. Nature is healing.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I tend to have a more higher genetic variation in the population, primarily because I've seen what bad genes do to people, and I've seen how people with shitty genes behave. Like this, something that I like about the right wing is it is becoming much more aggressive with the physiognomy checking.
Oh God,
fantastic! Yeah, it's great because
I think Aporia just released a long essay on like, is physiognomy real? Like this, it's become so trendy.
Yes, is the obvious answer. Like there's certain people I can just look at and go like, you're just evil. I can just tell. Like my soul is looking.
Oh no!
Like
so bitchy resting face is just you're a bitch face.
I mean, I can't really say much because I myself look quite evil.
Oh no.
Yes.
Well, I mean, very clever in putting.
Yeah.
No, it's actually something that we noticed when we were in San Francisco last, and we were looking at like old protest marches and stuff like that, and we're like, oh my God, these people. Actually, we see this. So
they look like humans in the '60s.
They look like mutants. The
ones at the protests did not look like humans. And yeah, like when you look at pictures in the 60s, you're like, wow, this is before everyone got overweight.
They really look like the background from like Rocky Horror Picture Show. They look like that cast.
Yeah, they do.
It was notable. Yeah, you can see this if you go to the Harvey Milk Terminal at SFO. They're big, like wall-sized pictures. And it's just
I have seen some pictures of like the rainbow hippie marches, and I'm like, okay, God, if you want to flood the world again of these people, I would not be opposed. Just Give me a floating raft, it'll be good.
Alternate theory, it could just be the intense amount of drugs they were all on.
No, Simone.
That's true.
Free or was it a discount bin? Discount bin love. No, but where I really saw this loudly was we go to this conference where like I don't know if you've heard of like the effective altruist movement, but like our branch of it, the right-wing branch of it ends up mixing with the other branch. And the right-wing branch, it's the group that I generally call like the bio bros and everything like that. And every single one of them looks like a fraternity guy. Like, really I don't know if you've seen like Johnny Anomaly or like Matt Archer who runs Aporia, or we saw Cremieux in person from X, and he looks exactly like a character from like Animal House. Like, and and then the other side all actually looks like mutants.
Well, or as the Jolly Heretic calls them, spiteful mutants.
Ah, yes. I should get an interview with him, actually. He messaged me a while ago.
Oh, yeah. If you want us to like more intro you or something, just let us know.
Yeah, because I do find him interesting, and I feel like he can draw out like my spiciest behavior, and I can probably say some real shit to him.
Yeah.
But I don't have a topic to discuss with him.
He's more spicy than us. I'll tell you that. Like he is.
Yes, yes. I have some friends who've met him, and he is really, really based. Like I can deal with that. I can say I have some horribly spicy opinions that I'm.
He's the dude that.
I wouldn't say I'm. And he was filming a documentary at our house, and he actually offered. He's like, I'm going to cut out some of what you guys said because it was too spicy. And I was like, what did I say that was so spicy? And then I realized what it was. I went on a rant against the German people and how I'm glad they're going extinct.
Okay, yeah, I would take the opposite position. Because I have some German ancestry. So like,
I do too. But I mean, look at Germany right now.
Yeah, I kind of want their current elite class and return to the Kaiser. Because that to me was just where it all went really, really wrong. Like even the Kaiser said abdication was not a good idea. It did not produce what he wanted. And that's a whole thing I kind of want to tell to people. Just be very careful about who you wish to get rid of, because I can guarantee you the person that you wish to prop up is not the cure that you think it is.
Yeah.
You just see the currentness is evil, and everyone that you like is good, and everyone that you hate is bad. And that is very simplistic binary. That is not historically speaking accurate by any means at all. Like, take a look at what happened when you knocked off Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein, or literally anyone that America's intervened with in the last, I don't know, about 125 years since the Monroe Doctrine. So yeah, maybe give that a second thought.
That was actually this really underrated element when I studied technology policy. The whole thing was basically about when and how you should intervene when there's a market failure. That the only purpose of the government is to step in and intervene when there's a market failure. And then there was this one day in one class in the entire course where they were like, well, and I guess we should sometimes question whether or not the government is actually capable of sufficiently resolving market failures. Like, can they actually fix it, or do they make things worse when they intervene?
At Cambridge, by the way, for people who are wondering where she was studying this.
And they brought this just once, and it was never like, oh, well, here's a statistical analysis of every time there has been an intervention of this type and whether it has worked or not. There was no like, okay, well, let's try to figure out if it's on average worth it for the government to intervene. It was just, I mean, maybe it doesn't always work when the government intervenes. So maybe we should be asking that.
Just one lone moment of dissent.
Yes, this one little like, oh, maybe that's the question, guys. Maybe we shouldn't be like.
How do you feel? Yeah.
Why would we intervene?
Expanded the bureaucratic state and basically paved the way for the government America's suffering under now. That has a load of gunk that needs to get rid of.
Okay, here's my thing though about monarchies, right? There's a lot of monarchies out there right now of varying degrees of actual monarchiness and varying degrees of like shadow democracy taking place. Are there any countries or even experimental city-states out there where you're like, that's a model that I like, that it exists today? Or would you need
or in history?
Okay, yeah. First today, then history.
See, this to me is always kind of an interesting question to ask, because I feel like if you look at historically speaking at monarchies, it very much depends on how the people themselves want to be governed rather than the sort of individual kings of the time. Because you can always look at history and go, see, when people look at historically, they sort of look at the modern perspective of if this person was alive today with my politics, how would I rate their reign? It's very difficult to sort of look at history and go, what does a king in this period of time is considered like a noble or good king? Because you can look at history and go, you're Richard, you're Lionel, you're King Alfred, you're Catherine the Great, or Peter the Great, or Frederick the Great of Prussia, and sort of say like, well, they expanded economic opportunities during this time, or your enlightened monarchs or despots, And it's always for me the case of, if I was going to look at a modern day sort of state, the main thing that everyone is concerned with in modernity is materialistic gain, and really not much else.
Yeah, and to what end?
So yes, there you go, is to what end. And I've said to people, the biggest problem of modernity is not capitalism, it's consumerism.
Yeah.
There's no problem
with
with private property and free markets. That's all fine. The problem is that if you only live to consume, you're just a mammal.
Yeah.
But how do you think about this? I mean, so the point you're making is that you would judge the monarch by their ability to increase the material wealth of the people. How does that affect your thoughts, or do you think that that's a bad way to judge a good monarch?
I would say, like, if somebody were to ask me, like, what would a monarch do in today's society, I feel like it would be very difficult to answer that question when I look at the problems of our society today. Like for example, the separation of church and state is, in my head, is a better idea than what we have now, because like you can say that, well, if you look at you consider it the acceleration of progressivism if you were to wed it today based on what you see, which is maybe a good case to make. But then you might also make the case of, well, if we tried in a monarchy in today's society, might it be different because the structure is different? We don't know. They can maybe experiment with that. So that's kind of the thing that I would say. The main thing that I would like to see a monarch be able to do, or just any state in general, is just, you need to find a way to actually flex power, and also do it in a non-democratic way and just say, yeah, well, I'm taking the reins and you can piss off.
Yeah. Well, that's always been such a delicate interplay, right? Because when you look at the most famous monarchs, half of their story is them trying to wrest control from the nobility, which in turn is trying to undermine them at every turn and maybe subvert and take them over. So you're right. They don't, that you can't think of a monarch out of context. They didn't fall out of a coconut tree. They exist in the context in which they live and what came before them.
There's a really great quote. I wish I could find it, because a friend of mine posted me this. It was from a guy called Erik Ritter von Cornel-Ledeen. Very long name. He's an Austrian noble. Yes, he was an Austrian nobleman of the early 20th century. I think he was born in the late 1800s. Incredibly bright individual. I think he could speak something like 9 languages.
Well, classic European nonsense.
Yeah, classic Austrian aristocracy. I think he actually taught Japanese in Japan, which is mind-blowing to me. Yeah, very intelligent individual.
Beautiful.
Yes, and Mencius Mollberg, I think, has read him as well, because I know we read him because it was through Unqualified Reservations that I discovered the name and started reading his works. Yeah, and he makes a case of, in the old world, the function of the king was to unite with the peasantry against the aristocracy.
Ooh, that's good. Yeah.
And I know Mollberg also made the point of the 3 Aristotelian forms of government is rule of the many, rule of the few, rule of the one. And typically speaking, the 2 out of 3 or 2 uniting can knock out the 3rd. So in our timeline, it would be the people uniting behind the monarch to get rid of the aristocracy. Which is basically what you have now, is because I was watching MSNBC or CNN. Why was I doing that? But there was a guy on there who basically said that the bureaucracy exists to impede the executive. And in my head, I went like, you just gave the game away right there. You just said the bureaucracy exists to impede the monarch. That's what you just said. And at no point do these people ever discuss, I call it the procedure. And what I notice on television, all I see is them discussing what should the state be allowed to do. Not what is good policy, not what is good statecraft, just that this person is doing something that is illegal. I'm like, the reason why politics bores the shit out of me nowadays is because everyone on television just discusses this and nothing else. It's the reason why everyone is so dull and boring, because they don't know what good statesmanship looks like, because it isn't discussed anywhere. All they discuss is the legalese. But if you want to discuss what's good statecraft, you have to go back to a previous century because we don't see it in our timeline.
So the by the way, when he talks about Mulbug, he's talking about Curtis Yarvin, who's been on the show before.
Yes.
Friend, yeah,
Good
great
people.
guy. We should have him back on. I sent you an email telling you to ask him back on, Simone.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask how you prevent, like, this is my fear around monarchies and why I've generally been more antagonistic to them, is you end up like what you had with the Roman Empire, where you can get like truly atrocious monarchs that are purely self-interested when you look at like even I'd say average monarchs of the imperial period of the Roman Empire. What are your thoughts on how you deal with that?
I don't actually think you can. I think that's just a function of history. And you just have to weather the storm. Because like this is the common question that you always get asked is, what do you do when the corruption gets too hot? And in our timeline, the corruption is not touched through the democratic process. It just grows indefinitely behind the scenes. You're just changing the management, but you're not changing any of the people that pull the strings. So you make a surface change, but nothing actually changes. And so you get to the point where you just invest a whole load of money and time into this thing that it inevitably steals and grows from you, to the point where we don't know how this ends in our timeline because we're not there yet. And I fear the collapse comes, it's going to be really, really bloody and gory. And I eventually imagine bloodshed will arise at some point in our lifetime. I don't want it to go that way, but I think that is an inevitability, because I don't see the permanent bureaucratic class in our timeline willingly give up power.
Yeah, but I don't see them. So I'm like, my take on this is, and this is where I push back against stuff like, well, I mean, there could be a rebellion. And I've talked to Simone about this, where I'm like, she's like, could there really be a rebellion? And I'm like, well, all you need for a real rebellion to happen in this country is for one party to deny the election results of the other party. And she's like,
no.
I
To
disagree.
Spoon's point, starving people. Yeah, people have to like
starving people doesn't create rebellion. Venezuelans have starving people for a long time, and they didn't get a rebellion. Things, it is not on the ground.
I think they're fed. They may not have electricity for days, but they're
in fact, if you look at the British Empire, it was the wealthiest parts that rebelled first.
Yes, G.K. Chesterton made that point, that the aristocracy is always anarchists.
They are they do seem to be the most dangerous ones, to be fair.
Yes, he said, because the anarchists, the aristocratic class, they have no interest in good government because they can always leave. They have money. It's the poorest people that have the most interest in good government because they don't have any other option. Which is probably why poor people like a strong executive.
Yes. Oh, that's a really strong tie together here. Okay, well, here's the question I have for you. How do you pull all this together? So like when you look at like crashing fertility rates and what that's going to do to like the global economic and tax system, sort of how do you see, what's your path to chart forward into the future? What's your hypothesis for your family, for example?
Oh, good God. So how would I institute, like, basically how would you make traditional values cool? I would say, you know what I think is honestly missing from not just the right wing? Okay, I'll use an example, and I'm going to piss off a whole bunch of people saying this, because this is sort of where I deviate and annoy a lot of people, is take, for example, Andrew Tate.
Okay.
Now, Andrew Tate is a contentious figure because of what he's done outside of it. Now, my issue with him is I can listen to him and find him an interesting figure despite what he's done, because the way that I look at him is, can he say something interesting and thought-provoking? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I can look at somebody and ignore the bad things because I'm only looking for the good things. Like, I can separate the art from the artist and this kind of thing. And what I fucking detest about so many people who claim to be right-wing is they look at people like that and they see a face and all they see is the villainous actions. And the thing that I want to tell these people, do you understand that there's people like me who don't care for the bad things because they're looking at him as a positive role model? When all you see is the bad, you can't go to somebody else who sees the good and go, stop listening to these people because you are looking at the bad and you're trying to impose the bad on them and ignore the good that he's done. All you see is a face of evil because that's your morality. And you can't just impose that on somebody and shred the good that he's done, because they're looking at you going, why are you imposing your evilness on me? I like, this person did something good for me and you're chastising him and making me feel like an asshole for it. That doesn't work. So what you need to do is you need to prop up. Andrew Wilson said this. It's not enough to destroy somebody's worldview. You have to replace it with something.
Yes, absolutely.
The right wing does not have an answer to Andrew Tate's popularity, because Andrew Tate is a popular person for the material world.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're trying to impose traditional values, you're trying to use a currency that is not currently in circulation.
But we have to get people off that currency. It's such a toxic currency.
The right wing doesn't know how.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem.
I think you point to something really important here that I've seen really positive moves on, which is the idea of cancellation prevents like the sort of intellectual diversity you see with someone like Andrew Tate. And JD Vance has been the biggest hero on this, with big balls saying stuff, racist against Indians, like within a year, right? And consider, JD Vance is married to an Indian and has Indian kids. And JD Vance was like, fuck off, like rehire this guy. Like, why did you let him quit just because it came out that he was a racist? And I think that
I remember that. Yeah, that was based.
That was so base. We need, like, as this continues, and I saw that as like we had one of our fans reach out to us recently, and they're like, actually, like, I had been like had trouble getting jobs in the corporate world for a long time, and me and my partner applied to jobs, and like we were hired this year, and like we were shocked, and like the partner is working at like a university now, and he's like vulnerable young minds are seeing his potentially conservative worldview. And I think that we're beginning to see a sea change on this, but we have to be really fastidious around like personally not allowing like cancellations to prevent us from, having people on and stuff like that.
I'm not kind of surprised by his choice of ladies, because one thing that you kind of joke about all white supremacists, don't ask them the race of their girlfriends. Yeah, which is good, because people have asked me like, why is that a thing? I said, well, it's very simple, because if you're the colonial empire, you colonize and then you take their women.
No, hold on. This is a problem for black supremacists as well. Go to the far left, like look at any far lefty, like racisty politician like AOC or something like that.
They all have white men.
Yeah. Well, usually Jewish white men too.
Yes, but like that's where the power is. And women are attracted to power. Like that's just like the one thing that annoys the crap out of me about modernity is there's so many things that is natural that we just ignore. Like, yes, there's those that will go with the Aryan princess and reproduce their children, and then those are like, your genes are shit. You must mate with better genes. That's how they're wired. People think that's like a controversial thing to say, but that is how they actually look at the world.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not, you can say it's mimetic because it is funny. But that is legitimately how they see things.
Because we've created fucking insane ideas of what a racist is. People will be like, if you recognize that there may be any sort of a difference between populations that have been genetically separated for potentially thousands of years, that makes you a racist. And therefore, a lot of people who are quote unquote like Johnny Anomaly, who we really like, he's married to like a South American woman, or JD Vance is married to an Indian. These people don't have fucking problems with different races. Like that's not the thing.
They're just breeding with them. That's kind of a good indication they're not.
Yeah, I love. There was the one thing where the left got mad at this guy who had like black kids and like called him racist, and he's like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah,
that's happened quite a few times. That is a very common.
I will say I can kill the accusation of racism in like a civilizational state in 2 paragraphs, and just with like 2 questions. The one that I always like to go to is, how is segregation and nation-state borders not the same thing, if not scale?
Segregation and nation-state borders. Yeah, I guess I don't understand. What do you mean by this? Like, explain this in more detail. I don't get it.
Well, let's see. If you're segregating, you're suggesting that only a certain amount of people should enter a given territory. Well, nation-state is exactly the same thing. It's just the legal bounds to enter is different.
Oh, I see.
Oh.
But I don't know. Like I always thought segregation was about only allowing certain criteria, certain criteria.
Yes.
In an area.
Yes. Yeah, but exactly. But it's still the use of force.
Like you're born with your national identity because of where you happen to be born. It's complete chance, Simone.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's complete chance what like ethnic group you're born into.
Okay, okay, that makes sense.
But you are still prohibiting the entry into a certain territory through the use of force.
Yeah.
Which is what you do in segregation as well. And as far as that is concerned, I would just say to anybody, because I've noticed leftism loves blood and soil when it's native population, except when it's Europeans. Then everyone else must be allowed to enter European territory. It's funny how that one works.
Yeah, there's no Indigenous Peoples Day in the United Kingdom.
No, hold on. It's Europeans, or where they really hate it if it's blood and soil Jews. I'm like, one population in this world where they were displaced by an imperial group. They then took back their native land and are fighting to defend it. And you guys want them erased.
But I would say that I conquered a territory, like any tribe or whatever, and somebody comes to me not of that tribe and says, give me access to your land, your people, your capital, and its markets, or else I will call you insert label X.
Yeah.
Why should I listen to that person and capitulate to their demands and grant them everything?
That's a great point. Yeah, no, because it is a lot of a capitulation. And I think the way this works within leftism is the intuitive belief in the superiority of their culture. By this, what I mean is leftists believe, they're like, oh, yes, well, like these Muslims may come to our country today and say that they want, gay people should be illegal and everything like that. But eventually, our cultural values will erase their own. And what we have seen is this belief in their superiority is as delusional as
anything else they believe.
Anything else they believe, but also, a lot of the historic racists, one of the things I always joke is, you'll see in certain populations where they'll be like, oh, this is where you get like delusional racism. When you start claiming like every historical figure was actually part of your ethnic group, like, oh, yeah, the Greeks were actually Northern Europeans.
Yeah, I do like that. It always makes me laugh because they also claim our history is evil, but you also want to be part of it. It's like, pick one.
Of white people.
Yes. And it's like, I so want to make fun of you all damn day long because there's just no consistency at all. It's good stuff.
All right. Well, wonderful. I've had, any path through this that you see for yourself. You mentioned elevating people like Tate, but like, how do you make this cool? Ballerina Farms, is that it?
Oh dear God, no. I would say it's one thing I don't like about like the Christian worldview is it's very, specifically the Protestant wing, is it's very focused on forgiveness. Because that whole like equality doctrine is very based on a sort of perverted Christian perception of almost like the white man's burden in a sense. And that just ignores all of reality. I've heard a lot of people just say, oh, look, like it's our job to like civilize the world. I'm like, okay, well, you do realize that that's kind of imperial, which is kind of based, I'm not gonna lie. But you also want to tell people they should behave like you, but you don't have any reason other than you're telling them this is how they should behave. And that's not how human beings work. People don't like it when other people tell them how to behave with no reason other than I told you so.
Yeah.
When there's
hold on. They give them lots of money. Look at USAID. That's what it was all about.
Yeah, and considering USAID was given to my country and it hasn't made a dent in making people sane, I'm not really a believer in that money theory.
Exactly, though.
Yeah,
exactly.
So yeah, it tends to, what was it someone said recently? International aid is taking money from poor people in rich countries and giving it to rich people in poor, or giving it to rich people in poor countries.
That is
so freaking accurate.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
I actually had a conversation with a girl earlier today, and she seemed to be more lefty leaning. I found her like in a very right wing. So like, you're an unusual person in a very right wing place. She's not stupid, definitely not, but she hasn't really examined her perceptions of the world. She was very adamant and researched into how she sees the world, but I tried to tell her this is a nice ideal, but you have to look at the world for what it is, not how you wish it to be, especially when it comes to people. And that is something that I've noticed a lot of, particularly American right wingers, cling to with like immense fervor, especially when it comes to the Constitution. And there's a really good clip by, Judge Andrew Napolitano?
The name's familiar, but we know.
You guys should check him out. So he had on Lionel Nation, both sort of, legal experts. And Lionel asked them, is the US Constitution still valid? And he gives a very interesting answer. He says, it depends on how you look at it formally and functionally.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he says formally it still establishes, the three branches of government, that is the law of the land, three branches of government, the separation of powers, yada, yada. But he says functionally, it has been an abysmal failure. It has failed to restrain powers. It has failed to balance, like the checks and balances don't work. Congress just passes whatever the hell they want. They tax something. And he said the best way to sort of rewrite the ship is to appoint governments or appoint judges that will chain the government down. And at the end, Lionel says, so the problem isn't the Constitution. The Constitution still works. The problem is it isn't being followed. And I thought, it's kind of weird to me that you suggest the way to fix this is to apply the Constitution, but also people don't listen to it. Like, that makes no sense to me.
If people aren't listening to it now, why would they listen to it then?
Right.
Yeah, so I just was like, okay, so you are admitting the document has failed, because Michael Malice had a good quote. He said, if you think anyone in government now is going to listen to the whims of dead men from 250 years ago, that is more utopian than communism. Like, damn, Malice has a way of just like cutting through the grain and just like hurting your soul. Like,
that's good.
That is very accurate. And I've noticed some of the Americans that I've spoken to that I can sort of break free from this sort of spell of constitutionalism is, my God, they start hating their own countrymen, because once they realize that, oh, I can't unsee this, and they come to me and go, I can't speak to anybody else about this because they all look at me like I'm insane. Like, yeah, if you can tell me how you fix that, please tell me, because I don't know how to answer that question. Because I also look at these people and go, I'm gonna get hated for exposing the truth, and then like the few that agree with me go like, yeah, welcome to the club. Thanks for ruining us. Like, I'm sorry about that. Not much I can do about that. Yeah, not a nice perspective to tell people horrible truths about reality of people, especially when it's
I
all
don't know. Like, I think if you told that to young people who were just learning about the formation of the United States, they'd be like, oh yeah, it was always early draft mode. This was not.
Do you know what's really interesting about that? Now that you mentioned that, because Aiden is also American, she's a monarchist, and we were looking at perceptions of monarchy across the demographics, and it's really weird when you look at them across the United States and the UK.
Oh,
in the UK, the younger people hate the monarchy, but the older people have reverence for it, which is understandable. I mean, they grew up in the Elizabethan era, so that's Whereas in the US, up to like 25% of Gen Z favor monarchy.
That makes sense.
Really?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, like there's like, and it's the reverse for the older age, obviously. It's like the older people like abhor monarchy because, well, they're older, they're boomers. Whereas the younger generation sort of look at I think it's because they just look at like their chances of actually getting like a house is basically impossible for them. So they look at, well, smaller government. I say to people like this is the pitch I always tell Americans to with, and they always think like, I say to them, think of Trump if you gave Trump complete control of the government, okay? But say 90% of government is removed. How much damage could he actually do when most of the bureaucracy is gone and there's no taxes to pay for the shit?
Yeah.
And they go, I have to pay significantly less tax, and I can see the one person doing everything. They're like, that doesn't sound so bad. I'm like, yeah, I can maybe get on board with that, because the moment you appeal to their pocketbook and like there's one person, but they can't do much because the bureaucracy is gone.
Yeah.
Suddenly they look at it like, oh, now my materialism is I pay less tax.
Well, it's kind of been like this since the beginning too. I mean, even after we voted in our first president, there was this huge struggle to, not have him.
It's your ancestors. You're.
And they're like, come on, man, just be the king. Can you just? Oh, God.
I've heard some people just say that, you're like, oh, just Washington, why didn't you just take the crown and we can be done with this?
They were so ready for it. They were like, okay.
So Simone, by the way, you are the descendant of one of George Washington's siblings, and he had no kids.
He's a great
so something. You would be of the monarchy family right now if it existed.
Yes, I would be in America.
Yeah, Washington dynasty.
Yes, or Duchess or something.
Yeah. I would have married into a monarch.
Oh, see, yeah. Oh well.
What a jackass he was for not accepting it.
Yeah,
okay,
it is really curious to me that there was 12 years when they had the Articles of Confederation, and that's been totally airbrushed out of history.
Right.
And nobody knows much about America's first government. Like, if you ask Americans who was the first king, they'll all say, oh, George Washington. Like, no, that wasn't the first king or the first president.
Yeah.
It was, I can't remember his name now. I think it was.
It
was.
That's because it's airbrushed out of history. Like, we've literally been brainwashed to not know this.
Yeah.
And
John Hanson, I think, was the president of the Congress.
Yeah.
I think he was the first one that was appointed. And I think there was problem with currency regulation was like one of the biggest ones. About they just realized that, okay, this doesn't actually work. There's too many competitions around, and you need the central figure. I remember them saying like, oh, but if we give birth to an executive, this is going to be like the fertile grounds of monarchy. Like, if only we can hope. because you need the central, you need the sovereign. You need
Yeah,
the one person when everyone is fighting. I remember I spoke to this one girl, and she's like very quite lefty leaning, and she was in favor of co-ops. And one day she came to me and she said, I'm kind of reconsidering your position. And I said, why is that? And she said to me, well, we have a bunch of people, but they're all fighting. Like, we just need one person to tell everyone to shut up and what to do. Like, yeah, I wonder why that is.
Yeah, daddy
Because
needs to
that's
stand
normal.
up and just be like, shut up, we're doing this now.
The amount of people who look at Trump as like a father figure, when they're just like, the meme was like, oh, look, daddy's home, and now you all have to behave. I'm like, you do realize all of you look at Trump like he is a monarchical figure. You look at him like the great man. And it's
Very
I
different
said
than the way Milo used to call him daddy.
yes, for different reasons. But it is curious to me that if you ask most Americans, who's your local representative, they have no idea.
Yeah.
But if you ask them who's in the White House, everyone knows. Because the perception, even with Americans, is that that guy is actually in charge and he's the one that can like do anything through executive orders. And to a certain extent, he can. But the problem with that is that Congress is a long-term fix for short-term problems, and executive orders is supposed to be a long-term fix for like really short-term gain.
Yeah.
And that needs to be in reverse. But to get people in Congress to do things in the long term, especially when they're there for because they're not interested in governing the nation through long terms, because there's no benefit to them when they leave office. Like, they're there for short-term stints to basically loot the place and then get the hell out.
Exactly.
So people, you have to think of voting as garbage collection day. As in, while they're in office, they can pile on as much corruption as humanly possible, and that little speech of like, oh, look, we can just shortchange, and the garbage goes out, disappears, supposedly, but it goes into a landfill, and then just the whole process starts all over again. And this little reset button that basically stops you from killing politicians. Because there's no physical repercussions. Like, you don't hold the politicians to account ever. And that's how the bureaucracy goes. And like, do you realize voting benefits the elites more than it benefits you? You get the veneer of being in control while somebody else props them on the ballot, and which is what they're beholden to. And you don't actually, your process is just like yay or nay, and that's really it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, not to mention even that in the United States, it was never supposed to be direct as it is now. That this thing was a huge mistake.
Your founding fathers were violently opposed to democracy for obvious reasons.
They were, for very good reasons. I mean, first they were like,
Hamilton is like crazy when it comes to democracy. Like, geez, Hamilton.
No, it's
we like him. He's. I remember Molbach said like he was America's first monarch because he's the one who really ran the treasury and ran it like a proper executive. Like, Washington is the face, but like the brains of the operations, like Hamilton is really running the show.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the original Elon.
The original.
Yeah, sort of in a sense, and but you know, all of these people have kind of shady ass backgrounds, especially when it comes to sex. Like, my God, like blackmail in the government. I imagine. I think it was someone that said like the way that China's bureaucracy gets any rank is they need to do some shady shit to like advance, which is why they're all like ruthlessly.
So they have dirt on each other.
Yeah, so basically the reason why it's all like militantly organized is because they can't step out of bounds because they know they'll get screwed if they try.
I love that.
On this, where we explore how, you know, PDF files ever became like, this is one of the crazy things when we talk about like conspiracies in the US. There was a conspiracy that there was a cabal of PDA files who controlled reigns of power within our country, or had a great deal of power within our country. And then we found out that was real with Epstein. And now everyone is like, well, we got rid of Epstein, so it must be gone now. Like, that's a done thing.
Yeah, that's sort of like, oh, look, we can just depose the head of the mob. And like, no, he's got like capos and a whole bunch of henchmen underneath him. Like, the way to topple the hierarchy is to start from the freaking bottom until he's alone. It's not by just capping off the head of the Hydra, because then the Hydra grows another head. Someone on my podcast suggested something interesting. They said that the reason they're not releasing the Epstein files is because the people in government, Trump can use them to leverage them and get what he wants.
Oh, that's a fun take.
I don't think Trump's doing that.
I just figured it was
because he was based enough to actually do that, but I don't think it's within him to be that kind of cutthroat. As much
honestly,
as
he's a nice person. Like, he doesn't he doesn't want people to hurt or suffer.
That's one thing. That's his kind of detriment, is that I think Trump is actually too nice.
too
I don't
empathetic.
think he is this like ruthless cutthroat asshole that everyone thinks. Like, something I thought was very interesting is I've seen like the left try to meme Trump, and they always make him sound way more dangerously based than he actually is. I'm like, can you just give me the Trump that the leftists think he is? It would be fantastic.
He needs to be more
But
more
I said to a
extra.
friend of mine, there is a reason why they're like that. Why they look at him as this great evil. It's because it triggers a response mechanism. If he is not this horrible evil person, then it induces complacency.
Hmm.
They
Yeah.
need him to be this radical figure, because if they realize, oh my God, he's not actually gonna like take away my right to kill my own child and this kind of crazy shit. He's just like a regular like 1990s American Democratic dude.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they realize that, then they might not radicalize and they might actually become right wing, and therefore that would thin their ranks. So
their fundraising is
there's a functionality in their absurdity.
100%.
All right. Well, we can't have the episode go on forever, so we got to stop.
We will let you go. Also, it's so late, so thank you so much for coming on. We
It's
really
actually only 7:30 here.
You don't understand. That's like when we're asleep.
Oh, are you like really early bird rises?
Yeah, we are.
I try to wake up around 2 every day.
Yeah. So
Jesus, how do you function?
Wait, are you in the UK right now?
No.
Yes.
Oh, you are in the UK?
Yes. I'm in Greenwich.
I am. Are you thinking about a movie? Like most of the people I know in the UK are looking at getting out at this point.
Well, my family wants to go back to South Africa.
That's probably not fun.
No, well, they said to me, like, do you want to go home? And I looked at them like, well, I don't have any other family here. And if I go back home, they said to me, well, you can stay like here close to us, because basically my aunt and uncle are rather well off, and they have like a guest house. And they said, well, you can stay there. And I saw the guest house because it's kind of weird. The last time they showed it, it was like 2010 Google, and it wasn't completed yet. So all I just saw was like, it's still in process mode. And I saw it recently because it got updated when like, that's where you want me to stay? And it's like a stone's throw from a beach.
Oh.
In probably a like more safer area. When like, I don't actually oppose this.
Look, you can
backup generators
in the UK right now. Like one of the Lotus Eaters, right? They got pulled over by like the passport control or something, right?
Yeah, Callum did. For terrorist activities, which is like,
good heavens.
Yeah, Callum,
really? Were you at ARC, by the way?
Not as far as I'm aware, no.
Okay, there's a recent conference they had there that a lot of the Lotus Eaters guys were at. But anyway, yeah, so I was so afraid of being like passport pulled over. Like I'm like the UK is getting scary, man.
Yeah, I would rather be in South Africa than the UK.
That's saying a lot.
That's dire. Okay.
I don't know if you heard, but Trump's administration is like letting people in for visas from South Africa as like a discriminated group.
I will say, because I sort of see a lot of crazy shit in South Africa from like my Twitter feed, and a lot of it involves Julius Malema. And to the people who have this perspective, can I just say this? Julius Malema in South Africa's politics is like AOC to you.
Oh.
He has no institutional power.
Okay.
And he never will. He's the crazy person that says insane shit to be relevant.
To be fair, like our only experience of South Africa was like just going through the townships outside of Johannesburg. So we probably don't have.
Okay. Yeah. So you saw like the roughest of it.
Yeah.
Whereas the
like,
Western Cape is where like
fuck up my shit. Let's go.
Yeah. There's a thing of like, basically the whiter the area, the safer it is, which is reality.
No. Like what we use to when we try to explain to people how demographic collapse is going to play out, we're like, just look at South Africa. Like,
yes,
there are going to be walled gardens that are incredibly nice, and that's where all the wealthy people with resources are going to go. And then there's going to be the townships, and that's where everyone who is not wealthy and resources is going to be. You're going to have brownouts, you're going to have blackouts, you're going to have crime, you're going to have rapes, and that's what it's going to be.
I will say it's South Africa is kind of a weird place because we essentially have 3 capital cities, which is quite strange. That like have, as far as I'm aware, like keep in mind, I left South Africa as a child when I was about just on the verge of 11 years old.
Okay.
So like if I were to go home now and describe politics, like it's very difficult for me. And we also have a rule: don't discuss politics with people who are not South African because they don't understand the reality of demographics. And like Like everything is like, what would you think of like an actual South African thing? It's like, yeah, all of that and way more based than any you Americans can
That's
possibly
what we
conceive.
gathered when we were there. We're like, okay.
Yeah.
The things with South Africa is that a lot of people are like, oh, it's like white people versus black people. And it's like, that's not really the way South Africa
No,
is.
it's
various
corrupt elite
tribes
versus everyone
versus
else.
each other. And the tribes will fuck each
Yes.
other even before they care about if you get one tribe elected to power. It's like, okay, let's loot from all the other tribes.
Yeah, it's like how any civilization works. South Africa is not unique. It's just unique in our timeline. But if you look at it from like a historical perspective, like if I tell people this, if you look at how South Africa's demographics came about, the South Africans, the Afrikaners who are native to that land, they've been there since 1652. It predates the American state.
Wow, okay.
They've been there
I didn't realize it was 1600s. That is...
Yes, it's really, really old.
To put that in context, you know how now we're all, oh my gosh, can't believe the Jews would displace the historic Muslims who lived in Israel. Well, Israel only became, or the place we call Israel today, Muslim majority, in the 12th century. So not that much earlier than this group moved to Africa. We do have to, this is so long at this point, so, but.
I'm sorry. It's so fun talking with you, Spoon. Thank you so much for coming on.
Great having you on.
How did you guys actually discover my channel?
I watched Aiden's channel first. I then watched some of your content with her. I then watched some of your content.
Ah, okay.
I'm going to say Algo for me.
Oh my goodness, yeah, YouTube is actually quite nice to me, which is bizarre because I've been told like you say a lot of spicy things. But YouTube tends to recommend me for some bizarre.
I think it just assumes, you know, it hears your, it must process your accent and be like, oh yes.
I've noticed. Have you noticed that YouTube has started suppressing? We recently did an episode, and there were 2 lowest episodes, and I think YouTube is suppressing both topics.
Yeah, something's going on.
You might want to rephrase it.
Yeah. Okay. I won't say anti. I'd say an issue related to the gender people.
Contemplating the rainbow hippies.
Yes.
The rainbow hippies. Yeah. No, actually, I have a question for you because it's pretty interesting. When I look at you, you are really much in like the social circle of, I think, like the old YouTube conservative group or like questioning woke group. Do you know when we talk about things like Aporia or Johnny Anomaly or Cremu, do you know who any of these people are?
Yeah, some of the names do surface.
Okay, so you do know some.
Yeah. You're on X way more than we are, I think. So
yeah, I mainly use X to shitpost. I've had some people like come to me, especially women, and say to me like, "You're very aggressive with how you are with women," and my immediate response is, "Have you seen my content?" Like, yes, I am very much against like any people voting, and I don't think women should have a say in politics. I'm very vocal about that. I will openly say that. I don't care who gets offended. The thing of it is that I find very fascinating about that is the women who are traditional are more traditional than the men.
So people don't know this, but during suffrage in the United States, the primary anti-suffrage group was women.
Yeah, dude. Yes.
Yeah, and I said to them as well, like, if you look at my audience and my timeline, I always tell people what irks me. It's not just like, I hate women today, and then just like ramble. Like, no. I will give you an example of this thing that is currently pissing me off. And when it comes to like women, it was probably a woman who DM'd me in the first place.
Right.
Because they come to me and go, Spoon, look at the stupid shit that my sex is doing. Yell at them.
They're the police. They're the secret.
Yeah, because I tell guys this, like, be the guy that can openly talk about women in like in a bashfully, well, in modern day sexist kind of ways, because women cannot talk about other women to women because it just escalates into a fight. Yeah. So they will go to a guy and say, "This is the stupid shit my sex is doing. I know this annoys you as well." It's one of the few times, because I know women has this tendency of, don't actually solve my problem, just listen.
Oh, no, yeah.
No, but there's a bigger problem of like the guys who are feminists are always the worst guys to women.
Yes.
Recently, Simone, you know, like Ubisoft that put out like, you know, this one where they have the Johnny Somalia simulator where you go around as a black guy and kill random
Great
Japanese
phrase, by the way.
You know, great. I heard that. As soon as I heard Johnny Somalia simulator, I was like,
that's brilliant, actually.
That's what this game is. But anyway, so they're now in a lawsuit in France, and the things that their executives were doing to employees are horrifying. One
Yeah,
of
I
them
wouldn't be
would
surprised.
play porn so loud everyone in the office could hear it, and he made a woman do a handstand so he could see her skirt in front of the entire office. And then at another time, he had other employees
Very
hold down a
progressive.
woman so he could kiss her at a
Extremely.
party. Like
What
when
the?
somebody's doing feminist shit, this is the shit they're doing behind closed doors.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
But
Well,
anyway,
Malcolm, you found the solution. You didn't marry a woman. You married an autist, and that is the only
yeah.
safe way you
The
can do
But
it.
yeah, but the point that I was trying to make is that this is one of the few times where you can actually listen to a woman explain her problems, because the issue that is not one that can be solved. The issue is just like her own annoyance at her own sex.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that you can listen to and like sympathize with, because I can guarantee you what annoys her also annoys you. And you'll become
Oh.
friends because the one thing is mutual hatred.
Yeah, and there's nothing that can be done about it. So
Yes,
there's
that's
no solution that you're
yes.
like dying to present.
Yes, but they just want you to say, can just
That
someone,
must be
'cause
so frustrating. I'm so
yes,
sorry. Tell me
I have
more. How did that
yes,
make
I
you
have
feel?
yes, I have one female friend when she streams with other streamers, like when they're women, she just like messages me like, "Oh my god, these women are annoying the crap out of me," and then
Your
she comes and
main
streams with me.
partner in streaming is a woman, right?
Yes, I know. And I also have another girl that I stream with on Rumble, Vex Electronica. It's a bit of a different stream with Aiden, because Aiden is very prim and proper, and she like organizes everything ruthlessly. And Vex just messaged me and goes, "I'm annoyed, let's stream," and then we just make 5 hours disappear with
Oh my
no prep at all. Yeah, so it's
That's
just like
so
a
different.
rambling, and because we get to say gamer words and just like, this is the dumb shit that is currently wrong with the world, especially culturally. Because there's a lot of sort of like cultural anti-woke people that we don't like, because they're just liberals.
Yeah.
They're just disgruntled with liberals that went too far on the slippery slope and they don't know how to pull it back, other than just yelling.
Interesting.
But I'm trying to do a better job, like myself, because earlier asking like how we found you, if connecting with other conservative streamers, one of the things we've been looking at doing forever, we've talked with the Heritage Foundation about doing this. When we get together, we should talk about putting the first steps into this, Simone, is putting together a conference to connect conservative influencers with conservative policymakers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because, like,
I think the problem though
connection.
is again to Spoon's repeated references. What would ever incentivize a conservative lawmaker to do anything that isn't in their immediate best financial
The
interest?
Heritage Foundation
Yeah.
are good guys who want to make the world a better place.
The heritage, but they are not themselves the policymakers. They have to find ways to connect the short-term and often financial incentives of the policymakers
The
to
policymakers
long-term best
will
interest
care
of
when
the
it affect
people.
elections. The Democrats have been using the influencer class to affect elections for ages without any reciprocation. At the very least, we can try to create some reciprocation where the influencers can affect policy.
Yeah, I would say the sort of the real problem with appealing to a right-wing base is that it's very cruel. Like right-wing politics, like left-wing politics is very fairy tale and idealistic, and it's why it appeals to women. Whereas the right-wing sort of Chad aggressiveness really appeals to men, but like that worldview is very difficult to sell to men right now, because it is more than just materialism.
I'm going to disagree here. Every right-wing conference, and I go to a lot of right-wing events, and one of the funny things is whenever I meet somebody who used to go to left-wing events and now they go to right-wing conferences, and they're like, "Oh my god, everyone is so nice and accepting at right-wing
Yes,
conferences."
that's true.
And everyone at the left-wing conferences was so judgy and hateful. I didn't
And there's
expect it.
there's a spectrum. So the old guard conservative right-wing conferences feels very cliquey and very like you're not wrong.
Yes,
You're not quite right.
I have heard that as
And
well.
then the like farthest left American ones are like, hey, come here, I need to tell you my conspiracy theory. I'm a sovereign citizen and here's how it works, and you should never pay your taxes. And
But
like
these
it's
aren't the lefty right-wing conferences. These are the more right-wing. The more right-wing it is, like the
and the more
liberal
open it is. Yeah, the more welcoming it is. Yeah.
And it's so funny. These people I'm talking about who are like lefties, I don't mean like normal lefties. I mean like obvious trans people. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, the right-wing conferences have been so much nicer than the left-wing conferences."
Yeah, but I think they enjoy hanging out at the right-wing
There
conferences.
there was a point that I saw someone say that it was interesting. They said like the right wing is full of straight people that are actually gay, whereas the left wing people are all straight people pretending to be gay.
It's funny you say
Like
this.
that is so freaking accurate. Like holy
Not
shit! I
untrue.
know so many people who fit this paradigm. Like it's not even
Sneaky
funny.
copulation. That's a strategy in animals where you pretend to be the other gender to force.
But it disturbs me. Like, why is that a thing with the right? Because I've noticed there's a lot of like There's so much sexual degeneracy in the right wing. It's like when I look at some of the people, because I know some of them behind the scenes.
No, it's only degeneracy because it's on the right wing. It would just be normalcy if it were on the left wing.
Yeah.
Ooh. Okay. I
grew up on the hard left, so I know this.
So I recently was at a Heritage Foundation conference, and this was on like gender, being realistic about gender issues. And it was so funny. The conference was like, I'd say 25% lesbians, and people at this is the Heritage Foundation, and lesbians at the conference joked that this was the main lesbian dating event of the year because it was the only place they could go where it was still all real women.
No.
Can I read something interesting? This is a quote bit. I actually, because a while ago, Grok 3 came out on Twitter.
It's so good.
It's amazing.
Yes, and yet it said it had some better views. So I threw it a curveball. I said to them, can you give a cultural critique that you would employ to persuade women to give up the right to vote?
Okay.
And its answer was really, really good.
Okay.
Give it to us.
It said, okay, let's dive into this with a thought experiment. I'm assuming you're looking for provocative cultural critique and not literal policy proposal. I'll channel a mix of historical perspective, social theory, and a dash of contrarian flair to craft an argument. It sounds like me, actually. Here's how it might go. Imagine a cultural critique rooted in the idea of modern democracy, with its obsession and over individual rights, has eroded something deeper, communal harmony and natural division of labor that once held societies together. You could argue that voting as a symbol of atomized power pulls women away from a more primal influential role, the stewards of family and culture. The pitch might lean on a romanticized past, think pre-industrial tribes or even Victorian ideals, where women's authority wasn't diluted by a ballot box, but concentrated in the home, shaping the next generation's values directly. The critique would borrow from thinkers like Rousseau, who saw excessive individualism as a societal rot and twisted women's suffrage, while soulless empowerment actually traps them in a masculine game of power struggles and abstract debates, disconnecting them from their supposed true strength, nurturing intuition and moral grounding. At a modern swipe, the Chaos Expos and 24/7 news cycles shows how voting fuels division, not unity, and women as the civilizing force might reclaim their influence by rejecting the circus altogether. To persuade, you'd frame it as liberation, not loss. Ditching the vote isn't subjugation, but a bold opt-out from a broken system, a return to a sphere where influence isn't diluted by partisan noise. It's a hard sell, obviously, but I would lean heavily on nostalgia and gender essentialism, which plenty would call out as bunk, but that is the cultural angle dialed up to 11.
Okay, I love it.
No. It's there. That's it. I mean, between the 4Bs movement and tradwives and stay-at-home girlfriends, this is very much something that appeals to all ends of the political spectrum.
But hold on, I want to read something that was posted in our Discord in relation to this topic that I found really compelling, and I'm like,
join the Discord, by the way.
Because modern feminism is a movement that serves the male sexual imperative, it tells women that we should accept a man fornicating with us with no commitment. If we say no, he will go watch porn of women being beaten and trafficked and demeaned. If we say yes, he will demand that we mess up our body and hormone cycle with a pill. If the pill doesn't work, he won't support us, and authority figures will encourage an abortion. No wonder so many women are rabidly abortionists when the alternative is grim for them, which will traumatize you. If we date, he will eventually have you move in and perform domestic labor while having you pay rent and not giving you the benefits of marriage. And if you marry, you will bear children while working full time and doing most of the housework. Basically, the feminist movements are huge simps for Chad and then wind up unhappy and miserable if they have children at all. I mean, I don't agree with all that, but that's compelling.
I don't think any of that is true.
You don't?
No.
About feminists.
Oh, okay. It's okay. Whenever I hear feminist and the word marriage, it doesn't make any sense to me. It's like beer and ice that don't go together.
I'll explain. I am a feminist, right? And because I'm a feminist, while my wife does the housework, she also makes the family's money.
It's empowering.
It's empowering. I'm a feminist.
Yes.
Right. But like they I kind of want to say to them, like, to those women, what do they think their role in society actually is? Because a friend of mine said something horrible. He said to me, like, women's only value is basically sex. If you strip that away, like, everything else can be done better by men.
Well, making babies.
It's not sex.
Yes.
It's childbearing.
Yes, but that is directly related to sex. I mean,
Not
what was the line?
necessarily. There are ways.
I would say, but that is their role in basically human civilization, is to reproduce nice offspring.
Yeah, no. We are the agar. We are the stable substrate of civilization, and men are the high risk, high reward, disposable propagators of good software updates.
Yeah. Thank you for calling us disposable. That's very kind
You're
of you.
welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I called me a stable agar. All right, it's fine.
Yeah, but there's utility and stability, so that's kind of thing. Whereas like
there's utility in pushing a software update. Okay, it's just that only the good software updates get pushed.
I would say it's only compatible hardware that can receive the good software. That's kind of my comeback shot.
You really don't need to write your stuff, man. It's there.
I need to put that at the beginning. This is a good intro. Okay, anyway.
I have used that argument for a lot of the things that I think it's because book writes like everything is a computer program, and because I'm a guy and I also have this like input process output function whenever I analyze things, I kind of like that. So I said to people, the way that the globalists look at human beings, they look at them like they're pieces of software or a hardware that can be updated. I'm like,
sure.
That's not how humans work. They're not just, hey, look, here's just a hardware that can be updated. Like, have you ever worked with an actual computer? You can't just upload any software to the hardware, especially if it's old.
This is true.
With a computer, you can throw it away, you can upgrade the hardware, but not all hardware upgrades are compatible. And that's where you run into freaking problems. Like, hey, look, we're going to make it like a freaking Pentium 2 run Windows 11. Like, no, you're not. That's not going to work. So good luck with that. I actually wrote a bit about free speech using that. And I'm curious how it's going to go. Because I said a horrible thing with regards to free speech that is going to make free speech heads explode. I tried to frame it as an argument that free speech is not just like speech, it's actually like a consumable.
Oh,
yeah, that's
interesting.
That's fair.
Yes, in the sense of, in the real world, if you look at something like drugs and alcohol, that is regulated because it can alter behavior.
Yeah, sure.
And I said, speech has the same effect. It can also radically alter people's behavior and make them believe insane things, like trans people are real, which is not fucking true. And the other argument that I have is that speech is not information in isolation. It needs a base where those ideas will actually gel. Yeah. And the argument from free speech absolutists is that the way to beat bad speech is more speech. And I fundamentally disagree with that, because it's not true. In fact, the way that I characterize it, and I will basically power through this because I think this is probably the smartest thing that I've ever said, is that the idea that the best way to combat bad speech is with better speech is like saying the antidote to fat people is better food. You have to understand why they eat the bad food. Yeah. It's not that the better food doesn't exist. It is that they want the bad food because it makes them feel better. It is not an issue of being factually correct. It is about an emotional appeal.
That makes sense. Yeah, agree.
That is a difficult thing to sell to people. That is like, hey, look, you can have, like, on the one hand, you can have broccoli and steak or whatever, and that's really good. But on the other hand is pizza, and pizza is a hell of a lot better than the former. Unless you're me, who eats it every damn day.
Pizza or broccoli?
I eat pizza literally every single day.
Oh.
What are we having for dinner?
It has all the food groups.
I need to send you down to make food.
I've got a surprise for you actually tonight. Let's just say it has something to do with my dubious heritage.
Your devious? Is it
my dubious heritage? Yeah.
Oh no, Jewish?
You'll find out. Don't look.
All right. We'll see. It's good to have you on and have a spectacular day.
Yes, this was a pleasure. You are so clever, so fun, and everyone definitely make sure you check out.
What are you doing?
Well, okay, sorry. Okay, bye.
Cheers.
Hold on, I'm hitting in recording. I'm hitting record now, and we can throw this at the end. But yeah, I'm sorry. I have to talk. What are they thinking? Like, why intentionally be an asshole when you're trying to get support? We were talking about the DDoS attack by Ukraine on X.
Well, allegedly, still not confirmed.
Oh yeah, the left is pretending like
that's what Elon Musk said. Is it appears to be Ukraine related? So
yeah,
who knows?
He's got some good social capital to believe, I suppose.
I imagine his information sources are pretty good. So
yes. considering he is working with the state. So yeah.
Yeah, and Elon Musk allegedly is a lot more value.
Did you see that Trump is buying a Tesla tomorrow and is telling all his supporters to buy them to support Elon?
No,
a Cybertruck.
Really? That's so sweet. Oh, I hope it's a gold Cybertruck because otherwise, all bets are off.
I thought that was really sweet of Trump to do for Elon. You know, it shows a lot of support from him.
Yeah.
And I think one of the benefits of this like recent slew of Elon attacks has been that it has made specifically Trump incredibly sympathetic to Elon. And I think a lot of Trump's inner circle, who maybe previously would have been more cold on Elon, better understand, you know, just how much he's taking for this.
Yeah, that's a really good
which further embeds him within the administration sort of loyalty department.
Yeah.
And there was I think, you know, we're also beginning to see sort of who the slimy guys are. Like it was Mark Rubio who Elon was dressing down, and Mark Rubio was just being completely like an a-hole. Elon was like, you literally have fired no one. And Mark Rubio apparently reported, you know, shot back, oh, what about all those people that accepted layaways, like those 1,500 people? Like, does that not count?
For the love.
And it's like, obviously that doesn't count. You what are you talking about? That is what Elon did. That is what happened automatically. You were supposed to be doing something to make your own apartment more efficient as well, like everyone else.
Yeah, as if he was like exempt from it.
For those
literally the lowest effort option meant that he did anything. So, well.
Yeah. That he didn't actively fight other people helping him. You know, my little brother is on Doge now, so that's really cool. So he's hopefully going to go in, fix all of this. But it I think showed that Rubio has no future in the Republican Party, where it's going. That he would resist the efforts of Doge is just, you know, this is something that's like not just a Republican winner, but has like 70% like broad approval among Americans. Like it shows a complete alliance with deep state slime over, you know, the American people, which I guess I should have guessed. Like Mark Rubio does have a face that sort of looks like deep state ally type. Do you get that impression when you look at him? Like if I went to like a bureaucrat party, I'd expect him to be like king bureaucrat.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder what I come off as to people, because people say like I code specific ways. I don't think it's as a generic lefty, but certainly not conservative like they see it. They say you code like a dominatrix librarian.
Yeah, what's right? I mean, we typically hear soy boy with you, but that's like weird. That's the most common word. That is
it's a common word, and it's like obviously non-descriptive because I have, you know, fairly defined cheekbones, jaw, everything like that. So I don't know.
I think soy is not a physiology thing exclusively. It's I really don't know. Maybe it has to do with your voice too, because you don't have a deep booming voice. Kind of how with the animatronic Abraham Lincoln that
they made his voice deeper.
They intentionally changed his voice. They had a historically inaccurate voice because Lincoln too did not have a low booming voice, and therefore.
Oh, by the way, on the episode on gay conversion stuff, I don't know if you saw the title I came up with for it.
I love your title, and I am excited.
Which is, does electrocuting gay people turn them straight? We have to at least try.
This is going to be...
The episode's actually pretty good prepped, because I went into it, like AI was like really resistant to say that any of it might work. And so, and obviously, like, I'm not going to trust if there's like a bunch of studies saying it doesn't work, because, you know, you'd lose your job if you said it didn't work. So I decided to try to understand better when the specific types of treatment that they're using within conversion therapy were used in other aspects of psychology, like for phobias and stuff like that. Did they work? And the answer is broadly no. Like most of the stuff used in conversion therapy does not appear to work. It's not that there are like nothing would work. I suspect some medication stuff aimed at reducing libido would be fairly effective, but you cannot create arousal where previously none existed.
For sure.
In all of our understanding of sexuality.
Yeah.
So
like you can't give someone a foot fetish.
Yeah, you can't give someone who doesn't have a foot fetish a foot fetish.
It's not contagious. You can't catch gay. You can't catch straight. Doesn't work that
Well,
way.
I mean,
Although I don't know though. So here's where I'm like not so sure. Because this whole issue when I worked at Hub Pages was what the moderation team referred to as anti-porn. Like auntie, like someone's aunt.
Oh, yeah, you mean the Indian thing.
Yeah, and it was like normal Indian women. And I mean normal because normally when you see a picture of an Indian woman, she is a 10 out of 10 gorgeous woman. This was like 6s, 5s, right? So not an online, like even mid person.
Yeah.
And it was things like armpits. And that was extremely culturally specific.
But it was, well, I think, different cultures,
Oh, wait,
but
okay.
there may be ethnically linked fetishes or ways of looking at things. Like if you're talking about people who present phenotypically,
so you think it's genetic, just that it
young.
happens to be.
Yeah. For example, does Japan have a higher prevalence of that than other regions? I would guess it probably does. In terms of
No.
like, you don't think that they have a high, really? That would astonish me.
We've seen so much hentai at this point. And also, like when I was in Japan, I collected as a teen, I would collect all of the little sex worker cards. They had like little sticky notes that they would put all over like rails of bridges and stuff so that like you'd call them, like you'd pick up. It's like a business card, but also sticky notes. And like none of them emphasized armpits in pictures. That was not a selling point.
How are you confused? I said phenotypically young. I am trying not to say a word that gets this demonetized.
No, obviously. Okay. So that is a greater tendency. I don't know though.
In Japanese, look, it would be weird if arousal patterns did not code into ethnic and regional groups. That would
No, I agree with you on that, but I think that being into really responding to youth sexually is a pretty universal super stimuli that people respond to.
But this Indian thing, I do not think is cultural. I think it's genetic.
You just think it's genetic. So there is variation, but you just don't think it's cultural.
Yeah, I don't think it's cultural.
I could see that.
Well, I mean, okay, so what would be the argument here? Like, let's think through this, okay?
Okay.
If it was cultural, yeah, you wouldn't expect so many cross-cultural and cross-timelines-wise unusual fetishes. As I've pointed out, typically, if you can find an unusual fetish today, you can find it mentioned somewhere in a history book as well, which we've gone into on some episodes. There are, except for ones that they maybe lacked the technology to create in the past or something like that. But generally speaking, which implies to me that this is not a cultural phenomenon, even though people believed it to be. Like, for example, the one instance where there was a belief that I'm thinking of even historically in cultural fetishes was the English vice, was the idea that English liked being spanked because they were exposed to it like in their school system. And so, getting spanked with a paddle was like more common. That I wouldn't say is cultural. That I would say is exposure, potentially alerting them of a fetish they may have that other people don't have. But so I think that, you have some cultural like exposure, like but I'm exposed to normal looking women and like armpits and like navel. I would know if that was arousing to me. Like,
I don't think I've never seen belly buttons actually.
But changing what arouses you, I just think is incredibly difficult. Or making a new thing arouse you that doesn't previously arouse you.
No, I agree.
In fact, I've never heard of somebody being like really grossed out by something and then later it becoming one of their fetishes.
Like a sign flip.
Like a sign flip in like adult life. I've never heard of that.
I haven't either. Though I do wonder if the sexual proclivities of the guy who had a rod shot through his head.
Like, Phineas Gage?
Yeah, because Phineas Gage had a lot of personality shifts. I wonder if his sexuality was also...
Well, apparently he became much more sexually aggressive after that.
Yeah, but that could just be grouped with overall aggression, like maybe the sexual urges
or worse, inhibition centers.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't see that as compelling. But I don't know. Phineas Gage. What a name too. It sounds like a very steampunk name. If you had to just think of a steampunk name, you'd be like, Phineas Gage.
I like that too, yeah.
Yeah. Just had to choose it. Not even knowing who he was. Goodness gracious.
What else? Did you learn anything today?
What have have I learned? Oh, I've been working with Emma Waters on finding points of contact to reach out to. I will give you email drafts to review tomorrow morning for 5 people or so, asking for 30-minute
Simone
meetings.
wrote some executive orders for the Trump administration, and we're trying to find people to give them to.
Well, Pronatalist.org did.
I'm Pronatalist.org did through you. It's not like they paid you.
No.
So you did.
I wish they did.
We don't accept money from our foundations right now. We're like super lean, which, you know, whatever, maybe we won't be super lean forever, but right now, you know, it's a one directional cash flow into the orgs, not out of the orgs.
We give it money and work. But yeah, so I will send you those email drafts to see if we can